few minutes to the polar issues, and this is the Palmer Research Station that I got to go to 2 years ago. I was there with Buzz Aldrin. Buzz is the second man on the moon, and I have a whole packet of all their information. Now, these are U.S. scientists. Their bosses are the federal government, both Republicans and Democrats. So the research they're putting out, they have to be very careful. They don't want to be fired. So the research that they put out is available on several websites, 2 websites that have all their evidence and all the stuff they're working on. And it's too long to cover in 10 minutes, but I want to give you a brief overview from Palmer Research Station. Number one, something you're probably aware of, is that the sea ice has declined in our lifetime, and the lowest years of all time, ever since we've recorded history, have been 2007 and 2010. Now, I was directly impacted by that because I happened to be there in 2010, and the ship I was on was the northernmost ship to go without being an icebreaker. What's fascinating about this, is both good and bad, is the coast of Russia, which is on the left side. But now the Russian coast is ice-free. So what's that doing for the economy of Russia on the north coast? It's good, yeah, because they can now export oil by ship during summer months. They can put port facilities in there. So Russia has more to gain from global warming than any other country, but even Russia is concerned about this, and they're aware of this rapid change that's going to do this to affect agriculture. Yet they have the most to gain because they can now start to grow wheat, which they couldn't do before, and they can have ice-free ports. But as you can see, the amount of ice, it's not steady. We don't look at year to year. We don't care what the weather was like last winter. We look for long-term trends. Now, all around the world. Here's a concept that occurs both on land and sea. I'm going to mention it both. This is the land version. As the ice cover decreases, the surface of the earth becomes darker. And you probably know this. What absorbs more heat on a hot day? Black or white? Black, yeah. And that's what's happening here. On the left is in Antarctica. You can tell by those little penguins running around. And that bay used to be frozen every year until about 5 years ago. Just suddenly that whole bay is now exposed to ice every summer. So what's that surface look like? We have a comparison, ice versus water and guano-covered dirt. Which is dark? The dirt and the water. You can tell on that photo, right? And so the land and the water are absorbing more heat. So this is another positive feedback loop. This is what I was talking about earlier. The scariest thing in science, whether it's nuclear bombs or global warming, is positive feedback loops. And this is a very, very big one. That the less ice there is, whether it's on land or sea, the more absorption of heat, and of course that makes it even warmer. On the right-hand side, this is also in Antarctica. This is a valley in the foreground called Deception Island. And until about 10 years ago, that was always covered by snow. It never, ever had soil exposed, but now it does, as you can tell, in the foreground. And so now you have both the bay and the land that is much darker, so it's absorbing more energy. And of course, that energy gets radiated as infrared heat and gets trapped by the CO2. Right? Something that the American and other scientists down in Antarctica are researching a lot, and this has gotten press. This is really big, spectacular, and so the press does cover this, is that the ice shelves of Antarctica are breaking up. Every few years, another ice shelf breaks up. And they're progressing south. The ones at the tip of the Antarctic Peninsula started to break up first, and then each couple of years, another one breaks up. The one on the left is the Larsen ice shelf that broke up about 5 years ago. And each one of those icebergs are the size of counties. Imagine Orange County and LA County, all right? And then a bunch of the smaller ones are the size of Torrance. Okay, these are huge icebergs. They're made out of fresh water, okay, coming down from Antarctica. And the problem isn't so much them melting. The problem is they were holding back all that ice on the left. That's a huge ice sheet, the ice field of Antarctica. And every time that one of these ice sheets breaks up, it releases the ice that's coming down from land. Now you have ice coming from the land into the water and melting. What's that going to do to sea level? That will make it rise. It's the ice on the land, not floating ice. And the Wilkins Ice Shelf is the one we're most keeping our eyes on, and the folks down at the research stations are, because that's the next one to go. Something that is also in the press are certain animals. This is a photo of floating sea ice, and it in itself melting is not going to increase sea level. The problem here is the animals that live on it are being affected. And the poster child for global warming is the polar bear. Okay, and every one of them gets their food, not by eating berries or pine trees, they eat seals. And they eat seals that are in the ice and coming up through breathing holes. And with less and less sea ice, there's less and less food. And there's a definite effect on polar bears if you watch any show and any website on global warming. They'll mention the fact that the polar bear is endangered, and there's a big debate whether to put them on the endangered species list. Russian polar bears are doomed to extinction, for sure. There's not enough ice. They're going to have to retreat to around Greenland, and because that's a place that's coldest out there. Okay, this is my favorite picture of polar bear. So, and you say, ooh, but blue is meltwater on top of the ice sheet. It's not supposed to be that much water. That bear is walking in an area of about 90% puddles and only about 10% ice. Do you think you can find a seal in a puddle? No, because a puddle creates like a smelling area. You can smell a seal up to a mile away, but not if there's a puddle covering the thing. This is the most complicated of all the concepts, and it's the one Hollywood that got wind of this concept and turned it into a movie. Right, what is the concept? One of the great discoveries of the last couple decades in oceanography and earth science is that there's this huge global conveyor belt in the world, and it affects oceans all over the world. And basically, the water slowly, over thousands of years, makes it to the North Atlantic, and then when it's up by Greenland, it sinks. Why? Because it's cold water. Cold water can sink. And then, now this is an important thing, follow the blue arrow. You can see the whole ocean is filled with water from this one sinking area. This is what we call this downwell. There's a couple areas in the North Atlantic where the downwell fills the whole ocean. And this is important for mixing up nutrients and mixing up the oxygen. And this is why all the ocean waters are all the same all around the world. The problem is Greenland. I'll show you a slide later on. It shows Greenland is definitely melting. The southern half of it is melting like crazy. As it melts, it covers this part of the ocean with fresh water. Fresh water is lighter than salt water. If you have fresh water, it cannot sink. So if Greenland is melting and starts melting progressively faster, what is the problem here? Fresh water creates a cap. And if you cap over this downwelling system, it can't operate, or at least can't operate as efficiently. And if this slows down, we could have a positive feedback loop situation going on. And this was featured in an over-the-top Hollywood movie a few years ago. Anybody know the name of that one? Day After Tomorrow, yeah. And they made it sound like it happened all like in 1 year, or 1 day, 1 hour, or whatever. Where we don't expect it to happen that fast, but it is thought-provoking. Now let's go back on the land. We get a lot of our oil, and both Europe and America gets a lot of oil from cold places like Siberia and Russia. And you have to have the pipelines come across permafrost. That's a permanently frozen groundwater. And as the land warms up, and you get more and more bushes and more soil, here again you have the heating going on. More and more light is absorbed. Even on a cloudy day, you get more and more light absorbed, so there are more radiated heat. And one of the things happens is the permafrost starts to melt. And it doesn't melt in a calm way. It tends to heave up in certain areas. It tends to really mess up the tundra. And but you have to remember, well, a lot of Europe's oil pipelines and the Alaska pipeline are coming through these tundra areas. So what's this going to do to the pipes?
break the pipe.
and leading to breaking. Yeah. And the estimate is every day a pipeline in Russia breaks. If you care about humans on a grand scale, this is something that is scary, and you should be aware of and follow it. And here again, thousands of people are doing research on this. And this is a picture of Mount Everest that I took a couple years ago. You can see it's got a lot of snow on it. Himalayas have a lot of snow. The map on the right is a map of two of the most populous countries on Earth. They are India on the bottom and China on the right. Huge percentage, about half the people in this part of the world get their water from melting snow and ice in the Himalayas. You're thinking, what's that got to do with global warming? Well, as things warm up, are you going to have more or less snow? The snow gets compacted into ice, more or less ice. Less. 90% of all the glaciers in the world are melting faster than they're growing. And so it's a proven fact that glaciers are getting smaller. Now, over 90% are getting smaller. And as you have less and less snow and ice in the mountains, you have less and less that releases the water in the summertime. And that's what India and southern China and India and Pakistan and Bangladesh, those are like 4 out of the top 8 most populous countries in the world rely on their water from snow melt in the summer. What state in the United States also relies on snow melt in the summer? California, 1/3 of your water comes from Northern California snow melt, and another third comes from Colorado. So how much of your water here in LA is from melted snow? Up to 2/3 of our water supply. So as there less and less snow in the Sierras and Colorado, it's less and less water. We already are fighting over the Colorado River water. There's not enough water to go around. We're already fighting over bringing water from Northern California. But that's nothing compared to the 4 of the most populous countries on Earth that are fighting over the water. Okay, this is something that's pretty famous. The rising sea levels, almost everybody knows about the first one. And that is the ice caps melting, including Greenland and Antarctica, are causing it. But also there's all the glaciers in the Himalayas and the Rocky Mountains and the Cascades and the Alps that are melting. But a lot of people don't know that the second one, as anything warms up, it expands, it takes up more space. And so the ocean is very deep, it's 3 miles deep or 5 kilometers deep. And if it just expands a little teeny amount, you're talking feet of rocks. And so you combine these together, actually all 3, the melting ice caps, the melting glaciers, and the expanding sea ice. And of course, we're talking about sea level rise. These are projections from unbiased scientists whose bosses are Republicans and Democrats alike, and they show nothing but sea level going up and up and up. And the scariest prediction of all is the last sentence. The projections are up to 3 feet. Even if you don't believe the maximum projection, and let's make it 2 feet. Okay, maybe 1 foot. What's that going to do to humanity and to civilizations around the world? I want to point out, this is the proof that the ice caps are melting. The part in red was stuff that areas of Greenland that were melting more than 7 years ago. The stuff in pink is things, parts of Greenland that have been melting away for 20 years. Okay, in case you doubt, this melt is going on. When I was out there in the Arctic Ocean, we approached several of these ice caps, and we were looking at waterfalls that did not exist 10 years ago. And we're not just talking about one. There was about one every 200 yards, all the way, 200 meters, all the way down to the earth. It was amazing. And it wasn't a particularly warm day. It just, this is what, when we're talking about melting ice caps, we're talking about a dramatic release. That is fresh water coming from land into the ocean. What will that do to sea level? So as this arises, you can imagine flooding, and even things like water supplies involved. A huge percentage of our population lives along the coast, and about half of the water comes from groundwater supplies. As the sea level rises, it creates a phenomenon we call saltwater intrusion. The saltwater intrudes into the land, not on the surface, but underneath the land, in the groundwater, and that will shut off water supplies. In a rich country like the United States, oh, no problem, we'll just bring it from the mountains. But in a poor country like at the coast of Africa or South America, may not be able to afford to bring huge aqueducts from the mountains. The thing that has gotten most press, and it's an easy concept, so the world press have covered this. There are entire countries that are in danger of being flooded. This is the country of Maldives, and they've been the most adamant about publicizing the threat to their country. There's not much space to move. It's all like 1 foot above sea level, and where are they going to go? This is an existential crisis for countries like Maldives. What I care about is Bangladesh. Bangladesh has 150 million people, more than Russia. They all live at sea level. Where are they going to go? The sea rises. They can't go anywhere. Nobody's going to let in 150 million people, right? And can they build walls? No, they're too hard to build walls. So that, to me, the poster child for global warming and global climate change is 150 million people of Bangladesh. Now let's go to a rich country. In Italy, Italy's rich, and one of the best places in the world to visit is Venice. But Venice floods 20 times a year from storm surges, and they're getting more and more every year. So much so that they have to build a multi-billion-dollar storm surge barrier along the coast. Oops, I didn't want to depress you, so I thought I'd throw in a picture of me trying to learn how to ice climb. Okay. What I learned from this is you need crampons on your feet. You can't just use an ice pick, or people will make fun of you and laugh at you. And take your picture. Hurricanes are storms that are from the ocean. They're ocean storms. They're runaway storms. And they're the most powerful storms on Earth. I think you know that. And they're up to 200-300 miles across. And they're entirely dependent on hot oceans. If they lose either the hot or the ocean, the warmer the ocean, they'll stop. Okay? The problem with global warming or global climate change is the opposite, is that you're talking about the oceans getting warmer. And of course, the consequence of hurricanes, you don't need to be told, so what's the worst disaster in U.S. history in your lifetime is Hurricane Katrina. Was a direct hit on New Orleans and flooded it and killed 1,200 people. So if we have more and more hurricanes, it's going to cause more and more monetary damage. It affects everybody. You can't stop the hurricane. What rich countries can do is build storm barriers. This is outside St. Petersburg, Russia. Russia has built a storm barrier to protect their second biggest city from storm surges. The whole country of Holland built the biggest system in the world, plus the whole country is at sea level or below sea level. So rich countries can build these billion-dollar dike systems, these walls. But a poor country like Bangladesh or Nigeria cannot do that. The ways to reduce it is pretty well known. And the first one we're already working on, belatedly, the United States is going to double the fuel efficiency of the next 20 years. Little cars that run on hybrid and everything. It's about time. Alternative fuels, we're also working on 30 states that have targets that would produce at least a certain percentage of their fuel from sustainable power sources, such as wind power and solar power. And nuclear obviously has huge problems, and it doesn't seem to be likely that we're going to build any more nuclear power plants. And then sea power is a whole interesting. If you really want to open up your mind, Google Sea Electrical. These are the two websites I mentioned to you. They're full of information, non-biased information, and I really encourage you to check these out. Do your own analysis, your own research. Think of yourself, what other solutions are there? The one I'd like to mention most in my oceanography class is the idea that the southern oceans are devoid of iron. I guess that's the limiting factor. So if everybody paid just 2 cents a gallon, it could pay for a whole fleet of ships to go out and see the ocean with iron. And what would that do to the algae? It could bloom, and then we'd have more algae. But, that's a whole ethical thing. If you really want to mess up the whole ecosystem, well, we're already messing around. So, anyway, there's a lot of interesting things like that to look at.